Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Jane Yu, board certified dermatologist and Mohs surgeon. Today I want to talk about UPF clothing, what it actually is, how it works, who it is especially useful for, and whether it holds up over time. This is something that comes up a lot, and I think it is worth understanding properly because clothing is actually one of the most effective and most underutilized tools we have for sun protection. Now let's start with the basics. UPF stands for Ultraviolet Protection Factor and is the rating system used to measure how much UV radiation a fabric allows to reach your skin. It is similar in concept to SPF, which you are probably more familiar with from sunscreen, but there is an important distinction. SPF reflects protection against UVB, the rays responsible for sunburn, and does not account for UVA protection. UPF, on the other hand, measures protection against both UVA and UVB rays, which means it gives you a more complete picture of how well a fabric is actually shielding your skin. UVA rays are the ones associated with premature aging, DNA damage, and an increased risk of skin cancer, so that broader measurement really does matter. The number itself tells you how much radiation is getting through. A garment rated UPF 30 allows roughly 1/30 of UV radiation to pass through, which translates to about 3.3% transmission. A UPF 50 garment allows only 1/50, or about 2%. Anything that allows less than 2% UV transmission is labeled UPF 50+, and that is considered excellent protection. By comparison, a regular white cotton t-shirt offers a UPF of only about 5, meaning around 20% of UV radiation is still reaching your skin right through it. And if that shirt gets wet, it drops to a UPF of about 3. So the difference between everyday clothing and purpose-built UPF garments is significant. To earn a UPF rating, a garment has to pass standardized lab testing. The Skin Cancer Foundation requires a minimum UPF of 50 for their seal of recommendation, and that is a good benchmark to look for when you are shopping. Several factors influence how well a fabric performs. Construction plays a big role. Densely woven fabrics like denim, canvas, and wool allow much less UV light through compared to loosely woven or sheer materials. A simple rule of thumb: if you can see through the fabric when you hold it up to the light, it is not offering meaningful UV protection. Color also matters, as darker and more saturated colors absorb UV rays rather than letting them pass through, which is why a dark, long-sleeved denim shirt can offer dramatically more protection than a light, thin one. Fiber type is another factor. Polyester and nylon tend to provide strong inherent UV protection, while natural fibers like cotton and linen often rely on chemical treatments to get there. Fit matters too, because tight, stretched clothing can pull fibers apart and reduce its protective effect. So a looser fit is generally better for maintaining the garment's UPF rating. Now let's talk about who UPF clothing is especially beneficial for, because the honest answer is really anyone who spends time outdoors, but there are certain groups where it becomes particularly important. One worth mentioning right away is babies under 6 months. Since sunscreen is not recommended for infants that young, UPF clothing becomes one of the tools of sun protection for them during that window, alongside shade and protective hats. Beyond that, children in general benefit enormously from UPF clothing. Kids have thinner, more sensitive skin than adults, and sun damage accumulates over a lifetime, so the protection habits and choices made early on really do matter in the long run. For older children and adults, UPF clothing is particularly valuable for anyone who burns or freckles easily, anyone with a higher number of moles or a personal or family history of skin cancer, and anyone who spends time outdoors for work, sports, or recreation. People taking certain medications, including some acne treatments and antibiotics, can have increased sun sensitivity, making extra protection especially worthwhile. And if you are at higher elevations or closer to the equator, UV intensity increases, which is another reason to be more deliberate about coverage. It is also worth noting that UPF clothing is beneficial year-round, not just in summer. UV exposure is a concern in cold weather and on cloudy days too, and at high elevations the intensity is greater regardless of temperature. Now, a common concern is whether UPF clothing loses its effectiveness over time, and the honest answer is yes, it can. How quickly that happens depends on several things, however. Fabrics that achieve their UPF rating through chemical treatments or finishes rather than through the inherent properties of the fiber are more vulnerable to degradation with repeated washing. Harsh detergents, fabric softeners, and bleach can break down these UV blocking treatments over time, and the mechanical stress of machine washing can physically wear down the fabric structure as well. Heat from dryers can also weaken fibers and treatments, so air drying is generally preferable. For garments that rely on their intrinsic fiber properties like tightly woven polyester or nylon, the UPF should remain relatively stable through washing, at least until the fabric itself becomes worn or faded. As a general guidance, experts suggest replacing UPF clothing every 2 to 3 years with regular use, or sooner if you notice visible wear, thinning, or fading. A quick way to check is to hold the garment up to the light source, and if light passes through more easily than it used to, the protection has diminished. Garments used for outdoor sports, frequent swimming, and activities that involve a lot of stretching may also need to be replaced more often. So to get the most out of your UPF clothing, wash with a mild detergent and cold water, skip the fabric softener, and air dry when possible. Rotating between multiple garments rather than relying on the same piece every day will also help extend the lifespan of each one. One last thing worth mentioning is that UPF clothing covers what it covers, but it does not cover everything. Areas like your face, neck, hands are often still exposed, which means sunscreen remains essential. The most effective approach to sun protection is always a combination: UPF-rated clothing, broad-spectrum sunscreen on exposed areas, UV protective sunglasses, and seeking shade when you can, particularly during peak UV hours in the middle of the day. Think of UPF clothing not as a replacement for sunscreen, but as a powerful addition to your overall sun protection strategy.